The world outside her mouth is a land of giants, and I, a tiny speck, am a mere observer of this massive landscape. My home, tucked away in the dark crevices of her gums, is my fortress. Between the thick ridges of her molars, deep beneath the fleshy curve of her upper gum line, I have carved out a sanctuary, a hollowed-out cavity where I can sleep, breathe, and wait. It is small, but it is all mine. The walls are soft and slick with the residue of her saliva, the texture smooth and yet oddly comforting. It's a place that smells faintly of mint and her last meal, a scent that lingers long after the food has passed her lips. I am lucky in that I have found a space that is sheltered enough to avoid the dangers of the open mouth. Every day, as she opens wide to take in a new bite, I retreat deeper into my hiding place, pulling myself into the shadowy recesses where the massive teeth cannot reach. Her molars, gigantic and jagged, like mountains in this strange new world, are the only things I can rely on for safety. They form a protective barrier, a natural fortress that keeps me from the jaws of peril. She is a giantess. I have no name for her, but I know her habits. She is methodical, almost ritualistic in the way she eats. There's a certain grace to the way she chews, a pattern in every motion. Her teeth crush the food with such force that the pressure rattles through me like a wave. I must always be on alert, for if I get too comfortable, I risk being swept away by the sheer power of her movements. Her tongue is a vast mass of soft, wet flesh that constantly shifts beneath me. When she speaks, it hums and vibrates with the power of her voice, shaking the very floor beneath me. I can feel this subtle rumbling deep in my bones. It's not unpleasant, but it is disorienting. Her words, though muffled by the vast space they travel through, are like a storm to me, each sound an immense tremor that rattles my tiny frame. I have become accustomed to these rhythms, the pulse of her life. But the most dangerous moments come when she starts to eat. Food becomes a threat and a treasure at once. I am small enough to go unnoticed, but I am also vulnerable to being lost in the swirl of her mouth as she chews. Her teeth, sharp and unforgiving, can crush me in an instant if I am in the wrong place at the wrong time. I've learned to time my movements, to slip between her molars just before she takes a bite. But even then, I am never entirely safe. She might unknowingly swallow something as small as me. Her throat, with its cavernous opening, is always a few inches away, a reminder that at any moment I could be caught in the current of her swallowing and sent spiraling down into the depths of her body. When she chews, I hold my breath and cling to the surface of her gums. The pressure of her teeth pressing down is immense, and the vibrations from each chew send ripples through the ground beneath me. I've seen how quickly her jaw moves, the way her lips part slightly as she takes in another bite, and I've learned to wait. The food she chews can sometimes become lodged between her teeth, stuck in the grooves of her molars. That's when I make my move. I have found a secret path through her teeth, where food often gets stuck in the gap. Here, I scurry between the ridges of her molars, feasting on the crumbs that have been trapped. It's not much, bits of bread or meat that have been softened by her saliva, but it's enough to sustain me. Sometimes, if I'm lucky, I can find a piece of candy she's forgotten, the sugar crystallizing on her teeth, a treasure waiting to be discovered. It's not a grand feast, but it's survival, and in this world, survival is all that matters. But there is always the risk, the danger that, at any moment, she will swallow. The sounds of her swallowing are terrifying, like a massive current pulling at me. I have to freeze, to hold my breath and pray that she doesn't inadvertently swallow me with the food she's chewing. There have been moments where I have been certain that my time is up. The pressure, the movement of her tongue, the sensation of the food being sucked into her throat, it all feels like a prelude to my end. Her mouth, vast as it is a place of chaos, a place where I must be constantly vigilant. Yet, despite the risks, I have grown to love it here. There is a strange beauty in the rhythm of her movements, in the way she speaks and breathes, in the way the world shifts beneath me. It is a delicate dance, one that requires patience, caution, and a deep understanding of the world around me. I have learned to read her body, to know the patterns of her chewing, the way she swallows, the moments when I can venture out to collect my food. I know when to hide, when to retreat into the safety of her gums, and when to take a chance. It's not a perfect existence, but it is one I have come to accept. Her mouth is my world, and for now I am content. When the meal is over, the atmosphere in her mouth shifts from a chaotic frenzy of chewing to a stillness that feels almost peaceful in its quietude. I know this time well. The food, having been thoroughly chewed and swallowed, leaves behind traces, the flavors, the remnants, the lingering scent of her last meal. And that, in this strange and wondrous place, is where I find my solace. Her mouth is a vast, damp landscape, a labyrinth of hard and soft surfaces. Above me, the roof of her mouth rises like a domed ceiling, covered in the soft pink folds of tissue. The surface is smooth, slightly ridged, and often dotted with the remnants of past meals, sweat, saliva, tiny morsels of food that have escaped her lips. It's an ever-changing landscape, sometimes slick with moisture, other times dry, like the earth after a rainstorm. In the crevices between her teeth, I can smell the faint odor of mint or citrus, hints of gum or toothpaste that cling to the walls, remnants of her careful oral hygiene routine. But it's the tongue that I love the most. It is both a vast and intimate terrain, stretching far and wide across the floor of her mouth, yet soft and delicate enough to carry me on its surface with gentle grace. Her tongue, though it rests quietly between meals, has a rhythm to it, a pulsating, gentle undulation that feels like the heartbeat of the mouth itself. As she speaks, it sways slowly, like a great, soft ocean, the surface dotted with tiny ridges and valleys, where the taste buds reside. Her taste buds, which are spread across the entire surface of her tongue, are like small, soft mounds, each one an individual island of sensation. They are both comforting and overwhelming to me. Sometimes, when I walk along the surface of her tongue, I feel their soft pressure against my tiny body, each ridge a tiny massage as the great mass of her tongue moves gently beneath me. It is as though the entire surface of her tongue is alive, each taste bud a tiny, vibrating pulse that works in concert with the rest of her mouth. The air within her mouth is thick, humid, and warm, swirling with the rich scent of the food she's eaten. Each breath she takes seems to send a gust of warmth across my skin, and I am rocked by the vibrations of her voice as she speaks. Her words, though muffled by the walls of her mouth, still carry a weight that sends ripples of sensation through the air. When she speaks, I feel the vibrations in my chest, deep inside me. It's like being wrapped in the very sound of her voice, the low, rumbling hum of her words moving through her throat and resonating in the air around me. After the meal, when her mouth falls still, I venture out from my hidden nook beneath her gums. I tiptoe carefully between her molars, making my way across the rugged terrain of her teeth. The surface of her teeth is both smooth and rough in places, coated with a thin layer of plaque or leftover food. I have learned to navigate this landscape carefully, avoiding the sharp edges of her incisors, which could slice me open with a single careless touch. Her molars, however, are my favored path, with their broad, flat surfaces that often catch crumbs or bits of food that are left behind after her chewing. The aftertaste of her meal lingers on her tongue, an intoxicating mix of flavors that I am eager to savor. Sometimes the taste is sweet, a remnant of chocolate or fruit that lingers in the crevices of her molars. Other times it's savory, the salt of a meal she's just eaten, still present on her tongue and the roof of her mouth. Each time, I find something new, a morsel of bread, a speck of meat, a tiny scrap of sugar. I feast on these, scurrying across her tongue to pick up what has been left behind, a tiny scavenger in this vast, endless cavern. The deeper I go into her mouth, the more I learn about its nuances. The surface of her tongue is always changing, some areas smooth, other parts slightly roughened by the taste of the last meal. As I crawl further toward the back, where her throat begins to open, I can feel the subtle shift in the air. The temperature changes. There, at the farthest reach of her tongue, the air grows warmer, the scent of her breath tinged with whatever food she last consumed. It's almost intoxicating, this place where her breath comes in great gusts, swirling around me like a warm breeze. But there are moments when the sensation is overwhelming, when the movement of her tongue becomes too much to handle. When she speaks, her words shake the very foundation of her mouth, sending vibrations through my body. The force of her breath can feel like a gust of wind, and the entire world around me seems to shift with each intake of air. At these moments, I retreat into the recesses of her molars, seeking refuge beneath the safety of her gums. It's not just the food I crave. It's the experience of living within her mouth, the vibrations, the scent, the warmth of her breath. There is something oddly intimate about the way I move through this space, the way her body shifts and responds to every sound, every word, every breath. I am not just a witness to her life, but a part of it. The hum of her voice, the flutter of her tongue, the rhythm of her chewing, they all become a soundtrack to my existence. Her mouth, in many ways, has become my home, and though I am a tiny speck within it, I feel an overwhelming sense of belonging here. There is safety in the silence that falls after her meals, a quiet stillness that envelopes me in its calm. I breathe deeply, feeling the warmth of the air around me, the faint taste of whatever she's eaten lingering in my mouth. I have learned to treasure these moments, these quiet, suspended moments of peace. They are the calm before the storm of her next meal, the moments of reflection before the chaos of her chewing begins again. And when she speaks, when her voice rumbles through the vast space of her mouth, I know I am part of something far larger than myself, something far more immense. It happens in an instant. One moment, I am safely nestled between the molars of her back teeth, the warm and familiar world of her mouth surrounding me. The next, the ground beneath me shifts, and a powerful rush of air fills my lungs. My heart races, and before I can grasp what's happening, I am swept away, tumbling through the cavernous darkness of her throat. The gaping chasm opens wide, like the mouth of an enormous, hungry cave, and I am helpless to resist. I fall, faster and faster, as the constricting passage swallows me whole. Her throat, once a distant, looming presence, is now the only thing I can see. The walls of it close in around me, slick with moisture, the powerful muscles contracting and undulating in waves. The air is thick with the smell of food, meat, spices, sweetness, a mingling of all the things she has eaten. It is an overwhelming, dizzying rush of sensation. I can feel her pulse deep inside her neck, the rhythm of her heartbeat reverberating through the air, echoing in the confines of her body. The sound of her swallowing is deafening, as if the entire world around me is collapsing in on itself. I am spiraling down into the abyss, and for a brief, terrifying moment, I wonder if I will ever find my way back. And then, suddenly, the journey stops. I am plunged into darkness, a suffocating silence filling the air. The world is no longer the vast, open space of her mouth. It is now a closed, constricting tunnel of flesh. The walls are warm and tight, the air heavy with the scent of undigested food. My body is thrust into the soft, fleshy expanse of her stomach, and I am left to navigate this new, alien world. The first sensation I experience is the sheer pressure, the crushing weight of her stomach pressing in on me from all sides. The air is thick with the stench of bile, the heavy, acidic smell of digestion in progress. I gasp, struggling to take in a breath as I lie flat against the slick, soft surface of her stomach lining. The walls here are soft but firm, their rhythmic contractions like a heartbeat, pulsing and shifting with every movement of her body. The atmosphere is dense, almost claustrophobic, and I am overwhelmed by the sheer size of this new environment. I am not alone. The digestive fluids, constantly churning within her stomach, bubble and swirl, making strange, gurgling sounds that reverberate around me. The acids slosh around, their burning heat faintly seeping through the lining of her stomach. It's a strange, unsettling sensation. The warmth here is different, hotter, more oppressive. The air is thick, like the weight of a humid summer day, and it presses down on me from every direction. The ground beneath me shifts as her stomach contracts, and I feel myself being pushed against the soft tissue. I can barely move without feeling the pressure of the surrounding walls, like the grip of some unseen force holding me in place. The texture of the stomach lining is slick, covered in a thin layer of mucus, but it is not uncomfortable. It's just unfamiliar. There is no soft cushion of her gums, no firm ridges of her teeth beneath me. The floor here is an unyielding, smooth expanse of muscle and tissue, and the air smells faintly sour, like the inside of a cavern. Despite the discomfort, I begin to take stock of my surroundings. I can see faint traces of food, crumbs, bits of undigested meat, scattered across the surface. They float aimlessly in the viscous fluid surrounding me. It is like a grim, underwater world, where everything is suspended in this thick, gelatinous fluid, slowly breaking down and dissolving into nothing. I scurry to one side, avoiding the more powerful currents of stomach acid, and begin to explore. The walls of her stomach are not uniform. Some areas are smooth and slick, others rougher, dotted with tiny ridges where the digestion begins to break down her food. It is not a world that is made for comfort, but rather for survival. There is a constant movement here, gurgling sounds, the shifting of liquid, the slow contractions of her stomach as it churns her food. The temperature fluctuates. Sometimes it is cool, other times uncomfortably hot, and I find myself constantly adjusting to these changes, trying to find a place of stability within the ever-changing landscape. I'm not entirely without refuge. There are pockets of space within the folds of her stomach lining, areas where the pressure is less intense and where I can rest. Here, I take shelter, huddling against the warm, pulsating walls. I can feel the slight vibration of her heartbeat from deep inside her body, like a steady drumbeat beneath the surface. It's oddly comforting, a reminder that I am still connected to her in some strange, intangible way. But I miss my old world. I miss the safety of her gums, the soft, gentle rhythm of her tongue, the space between her teeth, where I could find shelter and food with ease, feels like a distant memory now. The environment here is far less hospitable. It is hot, cramped, and filled with an unsettling sense of impermanence. The food that floats around me is not the bounty I once feasted on, the candy, the crumbs of bread, the bits of meat. Instead, it is a strange, soupy mixture of partially digested food, a mess of liquid and broken-down substances that cling to my skin and weigh me down. There are no leftovers here. Nothing to scavenge, nothing to pick apart. The food is already breaking down, dissolving into the acidic fluid that surrounds me. I am forced to rely on the scraps that remain, the crumbs of her last meal that float aimlessly in the stomach's vast expanse. They are not plentiful, but they are enough. In this new environment, I must adapt. The most difficult part, however, is the isolation. The vast, empty space of her stomach feels so different from the intimacy of her mouth. It is a place of emptiness, where every sound is muffled, and every movement is swallowed by the oppressive quiet. I can no longer feel the warmth of her breath, the rumble of her voice vibrating through the floor of her mouth. Here I am small and insignificant, just another speck in a dark, endless void. Yet, I find that I am slowly adjusting. The fear, though still present, begins to subside. The panic that had once gripped me, the terror of being swallowed, is replaced by a quiet determination. I am no longer the carefree tiny man who had once scavenged for scraps between her teeth. I am now something else, a survivor, adapting to a new and unfamiliar world. This new life is not easy. It is a constant battle to find food, to find shelter, to find a way to survive. But I am learning. I am beginning to understand the rhythm of her body, the way her stomach contracts, the way the food shifts and changes. I have learned to move with it, to find places of comfort within the folds of her stomach, to gather what I can from the remnants of her meals. And as I settle into this new existence, I begin to realize something important. Survival is not just about the place you live. It is about how you adapt to it. In the end, home is not just a place, it is what you make of it. And though I am no longer in her mouth, I am still alive. That is enough. The days blur together in this new, strange world. I have no sense of time here, no way to mark the passing of moments except for the subtle shifts in the air, the soft, rhythmic contractions of her stomach that remind me I am still within her body. The stomach, with all its warmth and weight, has become my new home, for better or worse. The environment here is overwhelming at first. The walls, so close and suffocating, feel like they are pressing in on me from all sides. Her stomach lining is a soft, spongy surface that undulates with every contraction, each rhythmic pulse sending vibrations through my tiny body. The texture is smooth but damp, like the inside of a cavern. It feels like being trapped in an enormous, living creature, one that shifts and moves constantly, never offering a moment of true stillness. The air, thick with the heavy scent of food and bile, hangs like a blanket over everything, making it hard to breathe deeply. I have to adjust to the constant warmth, the humidity, and the faint stench of digestion. But this is my new reality now. I had once known the cool air of her mouth, the vastness of her tongue, the security of hiding between her molars. I had known the soft, sweet aftertaste of candy stuck between her teeth. Here, there is nothing. There is only the sloshing, gurgling sound of digestion, the acid-rich liquids swirling and occasionally splashing against me as her stomach churns. It's a constant, unsettling noise, the burbling of fluids that seem alive in their own right. The sensation of floating in her stomach, suspended in the thick, sludgy liquid that surrounds me, is nauseating at first. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced. It's as if the entire world is constantly in motion, everything swirling around me, out of my control. The stomach is an enormous, cavernous space. The walls, soft and yielding, are punctuated by occasional ridges, where the muscular contractions of her stomach begin to break down the food she has swallowed. It's hard to find a stable place to rest, as the ground beneath me is in constant motion, moving and shifting with every contraction. The air is warm and heavy, saturated with the deep, sour scent of her meal. At times, I can feel the heat rising from the depths of her body, like the warmth of a distant fire, making the air almost stifling. But there are places of comfort within this vast, undulating space. In the deeper recesses of her stomach, where the liquid is less turbulent, I find small pockets of space, nooks where I can curl up and rest. These pockets of stillness are my sanctuary, my safe havens from the relentless churn of the stomach's digestive process. I can retreat into these corners, where the pressure is less intense and where the acidic fluid doesn't splash so violently against me. It's a delicate balance, finding the calm amidst the storm of digestion. And when I settle into these safe spaces, I feel a strange sense of peace. Despite the discomfort, there's something oddly soothing about the rhythm of it all. The contractions of her stomach, though initially frightening, become a familiar lullaby, a constant companion in this new world. With every pulsating shift of the walls, I feel myself moving with it, my tiny body rocked by the deep motions of her gut. It's almost like being rocked to sleep in the gentle arms of the earth. The steady rhythm of the body's movements a reassurance that I am still connected to something greater than myself. The sound of digestion, the occasional gurgle or rumble, becomes background noise, like a faint heartbeat echoing through the cavernous space. Over time, I begin to adjust. I learn the lay of the land, where the food gathers, where the most acidic areas are, where the least turbulence occurs. I begin to navigate this environment with more ease, though the risks are always present. The constant churn of digestive fluids, the occasional splashes of acid, are always a reminder that I am not safe. But I have become resourceful. I find small crumbs floating in the thick, liquid sludge. It is not much, but it is enough. Bits of food that have yet to fully break down, bits of meat or bread that have been left behind. I collect these scraps, holding them close, savoring every bite. The food here is not the same as before. It is not the sweet, sugary remnants of candy or fruit stuck between her teeth. It is a raw, unrefined feast, harder to eat, but it sustains me nonetheless. The texture of the food is different too. Mushy and broken down, soaked in the digestive fluids that coat everything. It's not appetizing by any means, but it is nourishment, and it is survival. In these moments, I learn to appreciate what I have. The sense of home here is less about the physical environment and more about the adjustment I've made to it. I can no longer hide between her teeth or walk across the smooth surface of her tongue. The comfort of her mouth, where the world was both expansive and intimate, is gone. But I have learned to adapt, to find new places to rest, new sources of food, new ways to survive. The process of learning to live here is not easy, but it is necessary. There is a strange intimacy to being within her stomach. In her mouth, I had been so close to her, so directly connected to her in every moment. But here, within her gut, I am far removed from her actions, yet I am still a part of her. I can feel her body move around me, hear the deep rumble of her stomach as she digests, feel the vibrations of her breathing ripple through the walls. It's a connection that is not visual, not sensory in the same way as before, but it is a connection nonetheless. As I begin to accept this new reality, I start to reflect on my past life, on the time I spent in her mouth. There, I had been small, insignificant, yet safe. Here, I am far more vulnerable, isolated, and at the mercy of her body's processes. But I am alive, and that is something to be grateful for. The environment may be alien, the sounds strange, and the food less than ideal, but I am no longer trapped in panic. I have begun to carve out my space in this new world, learning the flow of things, adapting to the rhythm of her body. My new home may not be as comforting as the old, but it is mine to shape. The stomach, vast and unknown, is now my world, and in this world, I have found a new sense of belonging. I will survive here. Just as I survived in her mouth, I will adapt to this new environment. It is not easy, and the risks are many, but survival is about more than the place you live. It's about learning to thrive no matter where you are. And here, in the depths of her stomach, I begin to understand that truth. It's been weeks now, maybe months. I've lost track of time since that fateful day when I was swallowed into her stomach. The vast, cavernous world that once seemed so threatening, so overwhelming, has gradually become my new reality. And though I miss the familiar comforts of her mouth, the softness of her tongue, the sheltered corners between her teeth, I've begun to realize that this new home, as strange and uncomfortable as it was at first, has its own set of advantages. In the beginning, I fought against it. I clung to the memories of the mouth, the cool, crisp air that swept through her lips, the space between her teeth where I could hide. I longed for the familiar sense of safety that came with those tiny, comfortable pockets of space where I could rest without fear of being crushed by a powerful chew. The stomach was nothing like that. It was warm, stifling, its walls constantly in motion. The air felt heavy with the scent of half-digested food, the constant gurgling of acids that churned below me. I had no way of knowing when the next contraction of her stomach might strike, pushing me into the depths of the thick liquid surrounding me. Every breath felt like it was thickened with something sour, and every movement felt ungrounded, as if I was floating in an endless, watery world of discomfort. I remember those first days with vivid clarity, the fear, the panic that consumed me as I struggled to adjust to this new, unforgiving place. Her stomach, so much larger and more complex than her mouth, had a vastness I hadn't anticipated. It was an alien world, an unpredictable landscape of squelching fluids, digestive noises, and pulsing, hot walls. The sensation of being trapped within it, unable to see the world outside, made me feel small and insignificant in a way I had never known before. I had lost my sense of place. The familiarity of her mouth, the gentle press of her gums, the cool touch of her teeth, felt like a distant memory. I longed to return, but the journey was impossible. But now, months later, I've come to appreciate this new home. It's not perfect, no. There are still moments when the deep rumbling of her stomach fills me with dread, when the digestive juices rise and slosh against me, when I feel the thick, clammy weight of the environment closing in around me. The air can still be oppressive, heavy with the scent of bile and digestion. The constant pressure of her stomach contractions can sometimes leave me feeling disoriented, as if the world is shifting beneath my feet. But I've learned how to move with it, how to find stability in the chaos. In a strange way, this vast, undulating space has become a sanctuary. The stomach is quiet, apart from the low, constant rumble of digestion. There are no voices here, no sounds of chewing or swallowing, no tongue sweeping across the roof of her mouth, no teeth clashing together in a cacophony of chewing. The stillness of her stomach offers a peace I hadn't expected. Here, I can take refuge from the world outside. There are no sharp edges, no hard ridges of teeth pressing in on me. Instead, I am surrounded by soft, flexible tissue that cradles me, the pulsations of her body moving me gently with each contraction. At first, I missed the texture of her teeth, the rough ridges that I used to play with, running my hands over their smooth surfaces. I missed the way I could nestle into the crevices between them, curling up in tiny, protected alcoves. But as I began to explore the folds of her stomach, I found that there is a different kind of shelter here. The ridges of her stomach walls, though not the same as her teeth, offer a similar kind of comfort. They are smaller, more subtle, but they provide a sense of security. In some of the deeper folds, I've found places where I can hide, places where the pressure is gentler, where I can rest without being tossed about by the constant churn of digestion. The food, too, has changed. It's different from the scraps I used to scavenge from between her teeth. There are no sweets or candies here, nothing as delicious and easily accessible. Instead, I find myself surviving on the broken-down remnants of her meals, the bits of food that have not yet dissolved in the acids. They are smaller, more fragmented, but they are nourishing. At first, I had despised the soupy mixture of food and stomach acid that sloshed around me, the way it stuck to my skin and left a bitter taste in my mouth. But now I've learned to appreciate it. I've learned how to sift through the mess, picking out the bits of meat or bread that have yet to break down fully. The food is not as sweet or satisfying as before, but it is enough. It sustains me. And then there are the vibrations, the ones I once found unsettling, the constant hum of her body's movements, the rhythmic pulse of her heartbeat deep within her chest, have become a strange comfort. I've come to rely on them, to feel them in my bones. The deep rumble of her stomach has become like a lullaby, each movement of her body a reminder that I am alive. The vibrations from her breathing pass through her stomach walls, sending gentle ripples through the liquid surrounding me. I can feel her movements more clearly now, a quiet reminder that, despite the distance between us, we are still connected. I've also come to understand the benefits of being in such a vast space. The quiet, the stillness, these things were once terrifying to me, but now I find peace in them. Her stomach, though not as intimate as her mouth, is large enough to give me room to roam. I can explore without the constant threat of being crushed by the weight of her chewing. I no longer have to hide from the rough ridges of her teeth or worry about slipping between them and falling into the void below. I've learned to navigate the deep recesses of her stomach with ease, finding small, safe pockets of air where I can rest and recuperate. The world outside her body feels distant now, like a dream. The comfort of her mouth, of hiding behind her teeth, of tasting the food she ate, seems far away. But as I adapt, I realize that there is more to home than the environment itself. It's not about the place, it's about the ways I've learned to thrive in it. This new home, strange as it is, has taught me to survive, to find peace in the unfamiliar, to build a life even in the most unlikely of places. The stomach, in all its vastness, has become mine. I've learned to live in its depths, to find comfort in the rhythmic churn of her digestion, to savor the food that remains. And so, as I sit in the deep, pulsating quiet of her stomach, I realize that adaptation is not just about survival. It's about finding a new sense of home, even when everything around you has changed. This place, so foreign at first, has become mine. The warmth of her body, the gentle hum of her heart, the rhythm of her breath, they have all become familiar. And in that, I find comfort. This is my new home, and here I will stay.